on this. I could just
Sorry,
use.
didn't want to miss it.
I was just saying, someone was sharing something in the morning around 6:30. I could just share these two lines, and it felt like I'm sharing so much wisdom. It, it made me so happy, like bang on.
Which two lines?
Uh, so whatever they were imagining, they were going to a certain thought process कि उनको गिल्ट हो रहा था कि आगे वाले ने कुछ बोला या कैसे सोचा उनके बारे में.
Hmm.
Their intention was right. So I was just saying that your imagination comes from now from a place of what they are thinking. The moment you comes from a place that what your intent was when you decided to take that step, the imagination again changes, the perception changes
Hmm.
immediately from where you are currently, what you're thinking. So, yeah.
Hmm. Okay, yeah, that's an interesting way of applying this process. Ki being your imagination being a reaction to where the other person is coming from versus what intent you had started out with to begin with.
Right.
Yeah. Hmm. Very nice. Good thing you listened and were able to share this immediately.
Yeah.
Okay, let me share my screen. Maybe I should just tap the disk. Sorry. Okay, so we had been talking about the imagination in the course of discussing all the activities of the Jeevan. We had been talking about the activity of imagination that happens in the chit, and how up till now our imagination has been governed by our bodily sensations, or or the inputs that we are getting from the body. So that just doesn't just mean, our just the sensations of something is hot, cold, smells nice, smells bad, etc. It's also all the inputs we are getting from outside of us. For instance, like your example, where someone said something, reacted a certain way to my behavior, and I received that input from my eyes and my ears, so that bodily sensation I'm receiving, but I'm also at the same time also receiving the sensations that are happening within my body as a reaction to that. So that is also a bodily sensation where suddenly I have a little uh, wiggle in my chest, which feels like, oh, I'm feeling restricted, or I'm feeling looked down upon. So these are also habituated reactions of the body that we are receiving. And this is also an input that is going to the imagination via the body. And if that becomes the basis of our imagination, then we have found that such imagination has been unsuccessful in being behavioral. And then behavioral was described as behavioral is that which is capable of functioning in orderliness, in relationships, in justice, in balance, in regulation, in lawfulness, all that. So, whereas when our imagination is directed by our understanding, that is our realization of coexistence, then we find that our imagination is able to be behavioral in all these dimensions. So, the need for being behavioral in all these dimensions is really with that is what defines whether we have actually uh, dedic I mean, that is what determines whether we become dedicated towards persevering towards understanding or not. So if we feel this need to be behavioral in our living, in resolution, in justice, in lawfulness, and all of these things, then we will automatically work towards that. Then we will make it our priority to understand more, to try to align our life better, mainly to understand better initially. But I'm sorry. But if that is not a need in us, this need to be behavioral in our imagination is not a need for us, then we won't align ourselves. We won't. put ourselves in this direction of activity, of understanding. So that is the distinguishing characteristic, something that we had come up with last
When you
time.
say need for us in behavior, what does that mean?
Need to be behavioral. So he had described behavioral, व्यवहारिक होना, in a very particular way. व्यवहारिक होना, or to be, our imagination to be behavioral means to be functional in our living. And functional means to be able to function in balance, to be able to function in lawfulness, to be functional in justice and orderliness. Yani, what we imagine, actually functionally, it is able to be lived out, and lived out in a way that leads to resolution also. Otherwise, we can imagine anything. We can hope for resolution, imagine anything, and live it out and see that, oh, it's actually not functional. It's not going the way we had hoped. So in that sense, our imagination right now is not functional. It's not behavioral, in these terms at least.
Right.
And now we were moving on to vritti. So, which is the second is the second most orbital from the outside in the Jeevan. The second most outward, what? The second orbit from the outside in the Jeevan. And in the Vritti, we will talk about its outward activity, which is analysis.
हम स्वयं स्वायत्त रूप में समझदार होते हैं, परिवार में स्वायत्तता के रूप में कोई तो दोनों पक्ष में रहते हैं, ये भी होना चाहिए, वो भी बनाते।
Alright, this was also talked about how with the modern education, people have moved away from employing our imagination for production activity.
चुटकी में आने वाली बात, जीने की चित्रण को हम कर लेते हैं, फलस्वरूप सुखपूर्वक जीने की बात निरंतर बनाई रहता है। ये निरंतर बनाए रहने का मतलब जब तक शरीर काल है तब तक सुखपूर्वक जीने की सारे विधियां, सारा उपाय, सारा नीति, सारा व्यवस्था बन जाती है। इस विधि से चित्रण का सार्थकता समझ में आया।
So in this way we have understood the meaningfulness of the imagination.
चिंतन का जो सार्थकता है, न्याय धर्म सत्य का साक्षात्कार ही चिंतन का सार्थक स्वरूप है।
Now the meaningfulness of contemplation is a witnessing of justice, resolution or dharma, and truth, and okay, he just mentioned that much. Actually, it's niyam, niyantran, santulan, nyaya, dharma, satya. But yeah, this meaningfulness of contemplation is when we are able to contemplate and through that witness nyaya for what it is, justice for what it is, order for what it is, and truth for what it is. That is the meaningfulness of contemplation, which is the inward activity of the chit. The outward activity is the imagination, and its meaningfulness is in living this way.
ये पहले ही निष्कर्ष निकल चुकी है।
So this is the conclusion that we had already arrived at.
इसके बाद ये जो चित्रण हुई उसके अनुसार विश्लेषण।
So now this sort of the imagination that we have had, we will now have an analysis based on that.
स्वाभाविक है।
That is natural.
विश्लेषण सार्थकता के अर्थ में होता ही है। सार्थकता के मुद्दाएं आपको प्रस्तुत कर चुके हैं।
So the analysis will happen in context of meaningfulness, and the subject matter of meaningfulness is something that we've already made clear to you.
इसी के आधार पर चयन होने लगता है और खुशहाली।
So that was a very, very brief overview of what happens in meaningful analysis, because now he's moving on to the outward activity of the man, which is choice. So analysis will happen in with respect to meaningfulness. Meaningfulness is justice, order, and truth. Now, when we analyze things based on that, we will analyze means to open up and to look at the components in an expanded way. So, if we're thinking about an event that has happened, we can open it up and think about everything that happened and look at it with the perspective. Now we're opening it from the perspective of justice or order. Order is the laws and the regulations and the relationships that have to be ensured, that ideally should be ensured. So if we look at a situation, say an interaction you had with your friend, like you were saying, your friend was sharing, you now will analyze it in terms of, okay, what is this relationship and how did I actually engage in it? How, in what sort of relationship did they engage with me? And what was the value or the lack thereof, which was, lived out by both of us. So that is what our analysis is going to be like, rather than, this person, he said this to me, so what did they say to me? How does this correlate to their negative personality traits that I've already thought of before, or someone has told me before? How does it, actually, usually our analysis is more in terms of the events. See, they said this, and they said this after I had said this, and I said this because they had said this or done this. And so our analysis is just based on the event, and the perspective is to find who was at fault, usually, or who was the victim. That is not a perspective of analysis governed by justice. The perspective of justice would be which values got missed out. What was the value within me when I was engaging? What was the value probably within them when they were engaging? I'll analyze their behavior to understand that. So that is analysis based on justice or resolution or truth.
Yeah.
Then,
Interesting point was, if you want to continue on this.
No. I was just going to do the translation. Say.
How he said earlier that it is always you who are happy on or the understanding. At the same time, it might be useful for others. It is definitely useful for others. But again, it is only coming from a place where, because it is satisfying my own happiness. Or so when I shared that, more than what she received, it's again my own analysis which helps me think about on these lines again and again.
Yeah, that's very important. What they receive is great also, but at least that is first and foremost, it is very satisfying for you to be able to function in this way, think this way.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is what a meaningful, that is satisfying analysis is like. Meaningfulness is anything that is fulfilling, which is satisfying, which fits into everything else. That is meaningful. So it's successful. Then we move on to, so we'll have such a meaningful analysis. Then we move on to, based on this analysis, we will also be choosing something or the other, which is an activity of the man.
कर चुके हैं, इसी के आधार पर चयन होने लगता है और खुशहाली के अलावा दूसरा कुछ होते ही नहीं है.
So on this basis, we begin to choose, and then there is nothing besides well-being that is manifested.
और उससे आस्वादन जो होता है, मूल्यों का ही आस्वादन होता है.
And I've forgotten how we translated aswadan, and what we relish based on that, which is the inward activity of the man, which is what the man tastes, essentially, what it experiences in one way. So relishes. So what is relished through this mechanism is nothing but values. So through this process, we are able to relish values in our man, instead of just relishing sensations, which is not satisfactory.
मूल्यों का आस्वादन केवल मानव मूल्य, जीवन मूल्य, स्थापित मूल्य, शिष्ट मूल्य और वस्तु मूल्य ही होते हैं.
And the relishing of values means it is just the value, the Jeevan values, the human values, the established values, the manifest values, and the object values. These are the 30 values that we had briefly covered in the Parichay Shivir also.
वस्तुओं में मूल्य का जो मूल्य है वो सतत निरंतर एक सा बना रहते हैं. जैसा
Now the value in objects, the object value, the last category that was mentioned, the value in objects remains as it is. It is always maintained in them as it is.
तिल एक चीज होती है, वो 1 किलो तिल में जो जो कुछ भी मूल्य है वो नित्य है, पहले भी था आज भी है.
For instance, there is some object entity called sesame, and the value that was present in 1 kilogram of sesame is the same as what was there yesterday and what has always been there.
तिल में जो जो कुछ भी मूल्य है वो नित्य है, पहले भी था आज भी है. और उसी प्रकार धान में, गेहूं में, सभी वनस्पतियों में, औषधियों में, सब में उनका जो मूल्य है वो निरंतर रहते हैं. उसका नाम है उपयोगिता मूल्य.
Similarly, in paddy, in wheat, in all these plants, whatever value is found within, say, 1 kg of them, it remains constant. It doesn't change. Whatever was there is the value that also exists today. And that value is also called its utility value.
उसके बाद आता है मनुष्य जो उत्पादन करता है, उसके साथ और एक सुंदरता मूल्य जुड़ती है.
Now, after that, beyond this utility value that naturally, eternally exists in objects, comes that value which gets added on to them when humans engage with this material and do some sort of production. And that value is aesthetic value, or simply beauty value, the value of beauty.
जैसा यंत्र बनाते हैं, गाड़ी बनाते हैं, कार बनाते हैं, रेल बनाते हैं, इसमें सुंदरता भी जुड़ जाती है.
For instance, we build tools, we build vehicles, we build whatever, I can't remember what he said, buildings or something. In all of that, we also add on an aesthetic value to these products.
और उपयोगिता और सुंदरता, ये उपयोगिता के साथ सुविधा की अर्थ में ये सुंदरताएं स्थापित होना देखा गया है. ये में सुंदरता भी जुड़ जाती है. और उपयोगिता और सुंदरता, ये उपयोगिता के साथ सुविधा की अर्थ में ये सुंदरताएं स्थापित होना देखा गया है.
So then we have utility and aesthetics. So we have found this to exist in the form of resourcefulness. Suvidha is like ease of use, or suvidhajanak hona is to be easy to use. So we have found this to be in the form of ease of use besides just utility.
ये सार्थक लगता है.
And this seems to be meaningful.
सार्थक है भी.
And it is also meaningful.
तो इस ढंग से हमारा विश्लेषण का स्वरूप बनता है. फलस्वरूप हम उपयोगी भी हो जाते हैं, सुंदर भी हो जाते हैं और सार्थक भी हो जाते हैं.
So this is the kind of form that our analysis takes. In this way, we become useful as well as beautiful as well as meaningful.
मूल्यों के मुद्दे पर जो जीवन मूल्य है इसको बता चुके हैं, जो सुख, शांति, संतोष, आनंद के नाम से जाना जाता है. ये कुल मिलाकर के जीवन की एक तारतम्यता, संगीत का ही नाम है.
So you've already mentioned these Jeevan Mulyas before. It has been mentioned that these are happiness, peace, contentment, and bliss. And these are nothing but the harmony or the coherence within the Jeevan. These 4 values, the 4 Jeevan values are nothing but, what did you say exactly?
करके जीवन की एक तारतम्यता, संगीत का ही नाम है.
It's but a name. These are but names given to the harmony or the coherence found within the Jeevan.
मनोवृत्ति की संगीत में सुख होना पाया गया है. वृत्ति और चित्त में संगीत होने का नाम शांति है, और चित्त और बुद्धि के बीच में संगीत को संतोष, और बुद्धि और आत्मा के बीच में संगीत को आनंद नाम दिया है.
So the harmony between the man and the vritti has been named happiness. The harmony between the vritti and the chit has been named peace. The harmony between chit and the buddhi has been named contentment. And the harmony between the buddhi and the atma has been called bliss.
यह है कुल मिलाकर के जीवन संगीत ही है. यह जीवन संगीत कब होता है? जो अनुभव मूलक विधि से हम जीना शुरू करते हैं, जीवन संगीत स्वाभाविक है.
So overall, this is nothing but a harmony of the Jeevan. And when does this harmony of the Jeevan occur? It basically occurs when we begin to live in a manner based in realization. When we begin to live on the basis of realization, then this harmony becomes natural. It becomes inevitable.
जीवन का सहज अपेक्षा है, जीवन का सहज माने उपलब्धि है, जीवन का सहज सार्थकता है.
So it becomes natural after realization. It is the Jeevan's natural expectation also to have this. It is the Jeevan's natural achievement, and it is the Jeevan's natural meaningfulness. What that means, that last bit, that to be happy, to experience happiness, peace, contentment, and bliss, he says, is the meaningfulness of the Jeevan. That means that is the very meaning of there being a Jeevan in existence. That is what a Jeevan in existence is meant for. To be able to experience happiness, peace, contentment, and bliss, which is this ultimate sort of harmony.
इन तीनों चीज अपने में हाथ लगता है.
So all these three things are something that we achieve, attain.
जब आस्वादन में हमको मूल्यों का सुख मिलने लगता है, उन मूल्यों में से जो जैसा मानव के साथ कृतज्ञता, गौरव, श्रद्धा, प्रेम, विश्वास, वात्सल्य ये सब नाम दिया है, तो सार्थकता के साथ संबंध को पहचानने की बात पहले से स्पष्ट हो चुकी है. ये सार्थकता के साथ हम संबंध को पहचानते हैं, तब ऐसे मूल्य अपने आप से जीवन में से निकलने लगते हैं.
Right, interesting. So he says, so when we begin to relish values in the man, that means we've already named these values earlier. With human beings, these values are things like gratitude, pride, affection, love, reverence, respect, trust, all of these. So when we start to relish these values in the man, we have already mentioned how we had begun to analyze based on relationships and values. But now, because we are relishing these values, we also automatically now begin to live out these values. I'll just repeat this part.
पहचानने के बाद पहले से स्पष्ट नाम दिया है, तो सार्थकता के साथ संबंध को पहचानने की बात पहले से स्पष्ट हो चुकी है.
Right. So what has already happened is we have recognized relationships, the meaningfulness of each relationship. We have already recognized. That's happened in the vritti and the chit. Now, because we have, that is how we are imagining, and that is how we are analyzing, that is how we are choosing. Therefore, we start to relish. Now, this is going inwards. Now we start to relish these values also. That is what the man starts to taste. That is what it is now experiencing. It is these values of gratitude and pride and respect and trust and all of this. So when this starts to happen,
ये सार्थकता के साथ हम संबंध को पहचानते हैं, तब ऐसे मूल्य अपने आप से जीवन में से निकलने लगते हैं.
So when we recognize the meaningfulness of relationships in the vritti, then these values automatically begin to emerge from the Jeevan. So this is something he had mentioned earlier also, that when we recognize relationships, the values flow automatically. We don't have to instill the values, we have to recognize the relationship. If the values are not flowing, that means we have not recognized the meaningfulness of that relationship. So he's saying now he's putting that, placing that in the context of the activities of the Jeevan. The recognition of the relationships happens in the chit and the vritti, and the living out of values is happening through the man.
इसका एक मिसाल, एक छोटा सा मिसाल देखा जा सकता है। जब कभी भी एक माँ अपने बच्चे को पहचान लेती है, ये मेरे ही संतान है, उसी मुहूर्त से ममता अपने आप से उमड़ने लगता है।
So a very small testimony to this, a very small testimony to it is that from the moment that a mother identifies a child as her own, from that very instant, she begins to, from that very instant, this care, the sentiment of care and nurturance begins to flow from her, which is the word we use for mamta. It just begins to pour out of her, this sense of care and nurturance.
इसके लिए ना तो पंचवर्षीय योजना होता है, ना 6 वर्षीय होती है, ना शतवर्षीय होता है। इसको आप सब लोग देख सकते हैं, मैं तो देखा ही हूँ।
For this, there is no 5-year plan required, no 6-year plan, no 100-year plan that is required for this. It happens immediately. You can all see this for yourselves. I have already checked it out for myself.
ये इस विधि से मूली के लिए आप हमको कहीं खोजने की जरूरत नहीं है, आप हमको कहीं भी माने इकट्ठा करने की जरूरत नहीं है, मूली जीवन में भरी ही है।
So in this way, for values, we don't need to look around for values anywhere. We don't need to gather the values from anywhere. These values are already, the Jeevan is already full of these values.
वो आएगा कैसा, वो नियोजित कैसा होगा? संबंधों को पहचानने के अर्थ में है। संबंध का पहचान केवल हमारा व्यवस्था के अर्थ में ही है, परिवार के अर्थ में ही है, समाज के अर्थ में ही है।
But how will they come? How will they get delegated? How will they get lived out? That will only happen on the basis of recognizing relationships. And a recognition of relationships is only in the context of recognizing order, orderliness, the human order and existential system. And sorry, what was the last one?
हमारा व्यवस्था के अर्थ में ही है, संबंध का पहचान केवल हमारा व्यवस्था के अर्थ में ही है, परिवार के अर्थ में ही है, समाज के अर्थ में ही है।
So the recognition of relationships is only in the context of the human order, in context of the family, and context of society. So if we don't understand any of these, we cannot place our relationships, we cannot understand the meaning or significance of relationships that we are living within. And if we don't understand the meaning or significance of the relationships, then naturally those values that we do possess, they won't flow. The values follow the identification of the relationship, basically.
सहअस्तित्व के अर्थ में है ये,
and it is in the identification of relationships is in the context of order, in the context of the family, of society, and of coexistence.
चारों पैर से संबंध का खूंटा बनी हुई है। इसमें
so relationships are tied to these 4 anchors of order, of family, of society, and of coexistence. These are the 4 legs to which relationships or identifying relationships is tied.
हम पारंगत होने के लिए आवश्यकता है ही है, बनी हुई है। इसमें हम पारंगत होने के लिए आवश्यकता है ही है, जितना हम पारंगत होते हैं उतने विशाल रूप में हम अपने को प्रमाण प्रस्तुत करने में सार्थक पाते हैं, समर्थ पाते हैं।
Now there is the need and opportunity for us to achieve this to the fullest, and that to the extent that we achieve this, we find ourselves capable of living in these relationships also.
पारंगत होने के लिए आवश्यकता है ही है, जितना हम पारंगत होते हैं उतने ही विशाल रूप में हम अपने को प्रमाण प्रस्तुत करने में सार्थक पाते हैं.
So the need already exists to to fully achieve these this understanding of these four, and to the extent that we do achieve this understanding, we find that we find ourselves capable of providing evidence of this.
समर्थ पाते हैं, इसको देखा गया है. तो इस ढंग से हम आस्वादन के रूप में मूल्यों को हम देखने लगते हैं. हमारे जीवन से निष्पन्न मूल्यों का मूल्यांकन करना ही है.
So we do find ourselves capable of providing the evidence that has been seen. And in this way, when we look at the values that emerge from our activity of relishing in the man, we realize that these values have to be evaluated. That is natural for these values to be evaluated. Whether and what will the evaluation be? The evaluation will be, are these values flowing or not? That is the basic evaluation. You were saying something, beginning to say something, Rajiv? Okay.
लगते हैं हमारे जीवन से निष्पन्न मूल्यों का मूल्यांकन करना ही है. इतना ही बनता है. ये मूल्य जो है ना, वस्तु मूल्य सब जगह में फैली हुई है, जबकि जीवन मूल्य, मानव मूल्य, स्थापित मूल्य, ये सभी मूल्य हम अपने में ही, अपने ही जीवन से निष्पन्न होती है. अपने ही जीवन में से इसका मूल्यांकन करना है.
Right. So he said we must evaluate the values that emerge from our Jeevan. That is natural. So the object values, which is the utility and beauty, these object values are spread all around us. They already exist around us. But the Jeevan values, the human values, the established values, and the manifested values, these only emerge from the Jeevan.
जीवन से निष्पन्न होती है. अपने जीवन में से इसका मूल्यांकन करनी अपने.
So they only emerge from our own Jeevans, and it is within our own Jeevans that we must evaluate them also. What are we evaluating? Whether these are flowing or not.
जीवन से निष्पन्न होती है. अपने जीवन में से इसका मूल्यांकन करना है. कितने बड़ी एक अद्भुत काम है और सहज काम है, जिसके लिए कोई संयंत्र लगाने की जरूरत नहीं है. कोई बाहर से कोई परीक्षण करने की जरूरत नहीं है. स्वयं से स्वयं को स्वयं के लिए परीक्षण करने की बात.
So what an amazing, astounding fact this is. The fact that these values emerge also from the Jeevan and are evaluated also by the Jeevan. And the fact that we ourselves are evaluating them, each of us can do it. We do not need to set up any sort of detection equipment for these values. That is quite amazing and beautiful.
संयंत्र लगाने की जरूरत नहीं है. कोई बाहर से कोई परीक्षण करने की जरूरत नहीं है. स्वयं से स्वयं को स्वयं के लिए परीक्षण करने की बात.
We don't have to set up any detection equipment. We don't have to do any outside examination. It is all about examining in oneself, examining by oneself, and examining for oneself. I need to see whether my values are flowing for my own sake, because that is the relishing of those values is what will fulfill me. So I'm also examining whether this is happening or not, evaluating whether this is happening or not for my own sake. And of course, it is within me, I will be checking, and it will be me who is checking. So by me also. So that is what is amazing and beautiful about this fact.
ऐसे परीक्षण करने के क्रम में जो हर व्यक्ति को इसकी आवश्यकता ही है, इसकी संभावना को सुलभ बनाने की बात है.
So in the process of doing such an examination, we know that every individual has the possibility and the need to be doing this in any case. It is only about making it more accessible to each of us, making it more accessible to each human being.
इसकी संभावनाओं को सुलभ बनाने का बात इसी विधि से आता है। दो नियम, नियंत्रण, संतुलन, न्याय के मुद्दे पर ही शिक्षा, संस्कार संपादित होता है।
And making it accessible relies entirely on the issue of having education and inculcation. That is how I'm translating Shiksha Sanskar now. Education and inculcation being all about laws, regulation, balance, and justice. So when our education and inculcation systems are focused on educating children on what laws are, what regulation is, what balance is, and what justice is, only then can this self-examination become easily accessible to all human beings.
जब ये शिक्षा, संस्कार संपादित होता है, जब ये विधिवत संपादित हो जाता है, जीवन जागृत हो जाता है, फलस्वरूप संबंधों को पहचानने में माने समर्थ हो जाता है, संबंधों को प्रयोजनों के आधार पर पहचानना बन जाता है, फलस्वरूप आदमी सुखी होता है।
So when such an education system becomes successfully established, that naturally leads to the Jeevan becoming awakened, the Jeevan of all the students becoming awakened, which naturally leads to, so the awakening of the Jeevan leads to the ability to identify relationships, that is the ability to identify the purpose of each relationship, and
माने समर्थ हो जाता है, संबंधों को प्रयोजनों के आधार पर पहचानना बन जाता है, फलस्वरूप आदमी सुखी होता है।
So you're able to identify relationships on the basis of their purpose, and consequently human beings become happy because they're now able to live out, relish those values and live out those values. And that itself, that relishing of values in the man, is the harmony between the man and the vritti. And as we had earlier discussed, the harmony between man and vritti is happiness.
ये मुख्य बात है।
So this is a major point.
इस विधि से हम जो आस्वादन तक पहुंचते हैं, उसके बाद आता है तुलन। तुलन के बारे में पहले ही अपन शुरुआत किए थे।
So in this way, we have already reached this activity of relishing. After that comes the activity of relishing. Now it's interesting. He started out with chintan, with the activity of contemplation, which is an activity of the chit. Then he moved upwards towards a comprehension in the buddhi, then realization in the atma, then authenticity or evidence in the atma, then resolve in the buddhi, then imagination in the chitran, in the chit, then analysis in the vritti, then choice in the man, then moved back inwards into relishing in the man, then now comparison in the vritti. So started the circuit. Important note, it's noteworthy that he started the activities at chit with chintan, because that is where our study begins, really. When we start to explore and study existence, that is when we are starting to work with our chit, with our chintan. Up till then, it's remaining quiet.
प्रीहित लाभात्मक तुलन को जीव जानवर।
Maybe I should, one second, maybe I should also show that chart.
Yeah, it's also interesting because I was just holding the chart. Because the first time I'm understanding how easy it is once you understand the arrows going up inward and the arrows going down outward.
Yeah. Can you see?
Do it horizontal. Should I share it?
No, I've shared it. Can you see it is what I'm wondering. Is it visible? I've shared screen. Wait, let me share it again. Can you see it?
Yeah.
So yeah, he started here at contemplation in the chit, then comprehension in the buddhi, then realization, anubhav, experience in the atma, then evidence in the atma, then resolve or determination in the buddhi, then visualization or imagination in the chitran. Actually, visualization is better. Then analysis in the vritti, then selection or choice in the man, and now we're moving inwards again. Tasting or relishing in the man, weighing or comparison in the vritti, and eventually back, we will reach back at contemplation. So we're about to finish this circuit.
पहले ही अपन शुरुआत किए थे प्रीहित लाभात्मक तुलन को बारे में, जो आस्वादन तक पहुंचते हैं उसके बाद आता है तुलन। तुलन के बारे में पहले ही अपन शुरुआत किए थे प्रीहित लाभात्मक तुलन को जीव जानवर भी करते हैं।
So after relishing comes comparison. Now we have already talked about this. Even animals perform comparison based on preferences, health, and profit.
मानव जो है, मानव का तुलन विधि है न्याय धर्म सत्य ही है।
But the mechanism of comparison for humans is justice, dharma, and truth.
ये ध्रुव मुद्दा है। ये ध्रुव बिंदु को अपने को पकड़ने की आवश्यकता है, चुटकी में लाने की आवश्यकता है, स्वीकारने की आवश्यकता है।
And that is the focal, that is the anchoring point, the axis of being humans. The whole axis of humanity, of humaneness, revolves around a comparison based on justice, order, and truth rather than on preference, health, and profit. So this issue is something that has to be understood, has to be accepted, has to be grasped by us.
अपने को पकड़ने की आवश्यकता है, चुटकी में लाने की आवश्यकता है, स्वीकारने की आवश्यकता है। जैसा ही ये स्वीकार होता है उसके बाद हमारा प्रयत्न उसी दिशा में होने लगता है।
And as soon as this becomes acceptable to us, then immediately our efforts become aligned in that direction itself.
जिसको हम स्वीकार्य रहते हैं उसी दिशा में हमारा प्रयत्न होता है।
All our efforts are always in the direction of that which we have accepted.
तो अभी तक की जो शिक्षा, संस्कार, मूल्यांकन जो कुछ भी धरती में मानव ने किया है वो संवेदनाओं के आधार पर ही किया, इससे अधिक कर नहीं पाया।
So up till now, all the education, inculcation, what did you say? Shiksha, sanskar, and evaluation that humans have been able to do on this planet have all been done on the basis of sensations. Besides that, we have not been able to do any sort of education or inculcation or evaluation.
और कोई परंपरा उसका बना नहीं। यदि मूल्यांकन होता अब तक वो संविधान हो जाता और वो परंपरा में होता।
There has been no other tradition that has been formed. Had there been any sort of actual evaluation of values that had happened, up till now it would have turned into a constitution and would have been established in our traditions. So he's saying there is no evidence that we have evaluated or educated on the basis of values. There is only, because that has not translated into the tradition that we have received. Had it happened, it would not have disappeared. It would have been, actually, it would have been cemented in the form, that sort of evaluation would have been cemented in the form of our constitutions and would have been accessed by us today in this tradition.
अभी ऐसा कुछ हुआ नहीं, इसीलिए अपने को तुलन में से जो 3 प्रीहित लाभात्मक तुलन को न्याय धर्म सत्य में विलय करने की आवश्यकता है, अर्थात न्यायपूर्वक प्रिय, न्यायपूर्ण प्रिय.
So nothing of that sort has happened till now. And that is why it is necessary for us to dissolve our preference, health, and profit-based comparisons into comparisons based on justice, order, which is dharma, or truth and truth.
की आवश्यकता है, अर्थात न्यायपूर्वक प्रिय, न्यायपूर्ण प्रिय, न्यायपूर्ण हित, न्यायपूर्ण माने समृद्धि.
What that means is this whole process of dissolving our comparison based on preference, health, and profit. What it means to dissolve these into a comparison of justice, order, and truth. What it means is that we will have just preferences, we will have just health and just prosperity, not profit. Then it's no longer about profit, it is about prosperity, because there is no justice in profit.
इसका लाभ के स्थान पर समृद्धि आ जाती है.
So instead of profit, we then have prosperity.
न्यायपूर्वक हम वस्तु को यदि हम उत्पादन करते हैं, हम समृद्धि के मंजिल में पहुंचते हैं, और संग्रह विधि से हम शोषण के मंजिल में पहुंचते हैं.
When we produce in a just manner, then we reach the destination of prosperity. But when we produce on the basis of accumulation, then we reach the destination of exploitation.
हम स्वयं भी क्षतिग्रस्त होते हैं और संसार को भी क्षतिग्रस्त करते हैं.
So we ourselves get damaged because of that, and we also cause harm and damage to the rest of the world. So okay, I think I'll pause here for now because we have about 7 minutes left, and we can take up any thoughts or questions based on what was talked about today. We've pretty much finished the cycle of all the activities of the Jeevan.
Can you help me just in a sentence understand what is contemplation?
Contemplation, actually he will talk about it a bit more maybe after this also. So first, when we start talking about contemplation, initially, it is when we don't have realization, right? Like in our state right now. And that time, contemplation is trying to identify the purpose of things, trying to identify the meaning behind things. Right now, when we are thinking or imagining, we are at best trying to figure out the hows. Even when we are trying to think about the why did they do this? Or why does this happen? We end up resorting back to how they did it or how that happened, how that came to be. The mechanisms, that is still part of Chitran, that is still part of visualization. Whereas when we start thinking about why this exists, existential purposes, existential roles of things, then when we start exploring those, that is called contemplation. And when we start exploring those, looking for those, then we start to witness it also. That is what Sakshatkar is. You start witnessing, the whole purpose of relationships is justice, is evidencing harmony and mutual fulfillment between us. We realize that is the first broadest thing we can witness. That is what justice is actually. So we start to witness justice when we inquire after the purpose of relationships. When we inquire after the purpose of, say, a tree, the purpose of an animal, we start to understand the role that they play in the ecosystem. We start to witness that regulation and balance and lawfulness in the ecosystem. So that is what contemplation is. It is pursuing the why and identifying the purpose, existential purposes and roles of things. They do exist. We have to find out. We have to look for it. When we look for it, we will find the answer.
Right. Okay. So just like in comparison, preferential comparison, say, or justice comparison, if you switch happens, that same thought process or same kind of evaluation goes into contemplation also.
Yeah, it's so when you're contemplating, you're not exactly comparing, it's a different activity. It is also an inward activity. You are more like you're just exploring. Of course, when you are looking for it, that will involve some analysis, it will involve some comparison at times, but those will be facilitating that process only. Essentially, this is a whole other activity when you're really essentially meditating on why something is, what is the role of this. If you
Like
look,
how and why. Compare would be how and contemplate would be why.
no. How is also in visualization. Visualizing and analyzing is also the how, because comparison is about seeing the value in something. You have an understanding of what value is. So something, it'll be based on what you already have witnessed. So for instance, we already have an idea of what our preferences are, what is healthy. I have some notion of it in our imagination, in our visualization. We have some idea of what is healthy, what we prefer, and what is profitable. Now, when we have to compare something, we can check, is this healthy or not? Is this like to my tastes or not? Is this profitable or not? So that is that process of comparison. It relies on having some notion in either our chitran or our chintan. If we don't have anything regarding justice in our chintan, then we can't uh, compare on that basis. So it's related. The content for both is the same. It is justice, order, and truth. But what we do with it is different.
Right. The activities are completely different,
Yeah.
yet related.
Okay. Manjuji, anything?
Hi.
Hi.
No, nothing.
Chalo. ठीक है. Then let's meet tomorrow, na? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.